Where am I supposed to sit? Marcus tilted his head, his eyes narrowing in confusion. I swallowed hard. The kitchen, I said. Right next to the oven, between two servers peeling cucumbers. And in that moment, as the laughter from the lavish family party echoed through the half-closed door, I realized that no achievement, not even a $30 million contract, could secure me a seat at the table where they still saw each other as family. Before I share this strange and somewhat heartbreaking story with you, I have a small question. Have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? If the answer is yes, please leave a comment below. I want you to know you're not alone. If you're new to this channel, please hit follow. The stories I tell here aren't just stories, they're truths relived from the heart for those who've quietly endured and are learning to stand tall. I'm Emily Carter, 28 years old, CEO and founder of Link Solutions, a supply chain software company that just signed a $30 million contract with Bradford Development. It sounds grand, I know, but honestly at that moment I only wanted one thing, to have a proper seat in my own family. Not at the VIP table, not in the spotlight, just to be seen. I grew up in New Haven, Connecticut, a quiet town where autumn leaves fall, like in the movies, and family dinners were always a mandatory ritual. There were 4 of us, my parents, Robert and Susan Carter, my older brother Daniel and me. Daniel, 3 years my senior, was the high school football captain, the pride of the neighborhood, the one who always got the uncles raising their glasses. And me, I was little Emily with the broken computer always tinkering with old PC parts in the garage. I loved math coding since 8th grade and quietly tapping away at my keyboard instead of going on picnics. Girls shouldn't be glued to computers all day, my mom once said. You're smart, but be a bit more practical, my dad added. Meanwhile, Daniel could trip on the field and the whole family would cheer with pride. When I won a statewide coding competition, my mom said, "That's great, honey, but are you going to wear a dress to the party?" I didn't blame them. I understood they were from a generation of pragmatism. They believed in what they could see, touchdowns, titles on business cards. And so I wasn't seen. I was just a shadow next to Daniel's success, the one they assumed was the future of the Carter family. But I wasn't going to accept that as my fate. At 23, I turned down an offer to work at my family's construction company. I moved to Boston, lived in a tiny studio apartment, used my dining table as a desk, and wrote the first lines of code for Link Solutions. No one invested. No one checked in. No one believed I'd go far. Except Marcus. I met Marcus Chin at a startup conference. He was a venture capitalist from Horizon Ventures, with sharp eyes, and a smile patient enough to wait for me to finish my sentences. We started as friends, then colleagues, then long evenings eating pizza on the floor of an office still smelling of fresh paint. Marcus never asked, "Why don't you just work for your parents?" He only said, "I see you. Clearly, and you don't need to prove anything for me to believe in you." And so when Daniel sent me an invitation to his wedding held at his fiancé's family's mansion, the Bradfords, I decided to go. I didn't want to hide. I wanted to believe. This was my chance for my family to see me not through Daniel, but as me. A week before the wedding, Link signed a $30 million contract with Bradford Development. The biggest deal we'd ever landed both financially and in prestige. Ironically, I found out that their CEO, who negotiated directly with me, had no idea I was Daniel's sister. Daniel had never mentioned me in any conversation with his future in-laws. When I tried to tell my parents over dinner, my company just signed with Bradford. $30 million. They're using Lynx's system to overhaul their entire supply chain. My mom only nodded. "Oh, that's nice. By the way, did you get Daniel's wedding invitation?" Was the lettering embossed? My dad stayed silent, and I just smiled, pushing my fork through a cold salad. Still, I held on to hope. I chose an elegant navy dress. Marcus accompanied me with a gentle smile and a warmth that made me feel more confident. I told myself that a small gesture, a seat next to my family, a hug from Daniel, a simple "we're proud of you" would be enough. Just that. And then I walked into the wedding. Marcus gave my hand a gentle squeeze, but the coordinator greeted me with a puzzled look and led me to the back, through the kitchen, next to the ice machine. "Your table's here, Miss Carter." I looked at the setup, 2 small chairs, a wrinkled tablecloth facing a cutlery cabinet. Me, the CEO of the company the bride's family was partnering with, was seated with the kitchen staff. That's when it hit me deeply, clearly, undeniably. They had never seen who I was, and maybe it was time I reminded them. "Marcus." I turned to him, my voice strangely calm. "What do you think if I redefine what family means?" Marcus didn't answer. He just looked at me with the kind of gaze I'd never gotten from my family, a look of recognition. Do you remember the feeling of achieving something huge, something monumental, and all you wanted was to share it with the people closest to you? I used to believe that if I succeeded, recognition would come like a well-earned reward. But what I didn't know was that some doors don't open with achievements, they open with genuine connection. And some doors, no matter how vast an empire you bring, will stay closed if the people inside don't bother to hear your knock. Before I continue, I want to ask you, have you ever wanted to share something you're proud of with your family, only to be met with indifference? If so, please comment below. I read every story because sometimes knowing someone understands is enough. And if you haven't followed the channel yet, hit follow, so you don't miss the next chapter where I'll share the moment I stood between the spotlight of my career and the void of family ties. The contract was signed on a lightly rainy afternoon. Outside the glass windows, Boston shimmered with streaks of water and streetlights blurring in the fog. In the office, people were popping champagne while I just smiled quietly. We had just signed with Bradford Development a comprehensive supply chain software implementation worth $30 million, a deal that could transform any startup. For Lynx, the company I built from a cramped apartment, this wasn't just success, it was proof. I still remember Richard Bradford's firm handshake after the signing. "Miss Carter, your product impressed our tech team. I look forward to seeing Lynx become a long-term strategic partner." His voice was steady, his eyes clearly impressed. But what I remember more, what matters more, was the moment I walked back into the meeting room after the signing, seeing my team's radiant faces as if they too had just closed a chapter of years-long struggle. I should have felt fulfilled. But deep down, I felt something missing. Success, when you have no one to share it with, becomes quiet. I called home that evening. My mom picked up. Her familiar, gentle voice carried the usual busyness. "Hey, sweetheart, perfect timing. I just got back from the store picking out a dress for Daniel's wedding." I smiled. I understood my brother's wedding was a big deal for the family. "I've got some good news," I said, keeping my tone light as always. "Lynx just signed with Bradford Development today. $30 million, Mom. They're implementing our system across all their new projects." There was a brief silence on the other end. I could picture her trying to grasp what implementing a system meant. "Oh, that's nice," she replied, then quickly added, "Have you picked a dress for the wedding yet?" "The Bradfords are fancy. I heard they have their own golf course." I went quiet. Not upset, not angry, just empty. Then my dad got on the phone. He asked a couple of polite questions before saying, "Scott, Tiffany's dad invited me to play golf next week. They've got big partners. Looks like Daniel's got a chance to expand his business." And that was it. My $30 million contract ended with an "oh, that's nice." Meanwhile, the conversation about dresses, golf, and Daniel's opportunities went on for another 10 minutes. I hung up, leaned back in my chair. On the table, my champagne glass had gone flat bubbles, long gone. I hadn't taken a sip. I don't live for praise. I've been through enough rejections, dismissals, and underestimations to know how to stand on my own. But I'm human. And no matter how strong I am, there's a childlike part of me that just wants my family to open their arms and say, "We're proud of you." I used to think that when Lynx succeeded, when I signed my first big contract, when I proved I could walk my own path, everything would change. I was wrong. That night, I lay on the office sofa, an old habit from the early startup days. The yellow glow of the lamp spilled across the ceiling. I couldn't sleep. I thought about the beginning, the tiny apartment, the rickety wooden table, instant noodles, and endless lines of code. I'd dreamed of the day I'd be recognized. I'd imagined calling home, telling them about a multi-million-dollar deal, and hearing my mom burst with excitement. I pictured my dad emailing a congratulations, maybe inviting me home for a celebratory dinner. Instead, all I got was, "Oh, that's nice." Marcus showed up near midnight carrying tacos and a hot tea. "You're still here?" he asked, seeing me still in the suit from that morning. I shook my head. I called my mom, told her about today. And what did they say? I looked up. Daniel got more airtime than me as usual. Marcus didn't say anything. He just sat beside me, opened the taco box, and handed me one. We ate in silence. In that silence, I understood not everyone can see the mountain you've climbed. And not everyone wants to climb it with you, especially if they don't believe you could go that far. The next day at the office, the Lynx team was buzzing, rolling out a new interface, prepping for the Bradford implementation. I led everything as usual, but deep down I realized something. I didn't just need a contract. I needed to feel like I had a place in the hearts of those I loved. You can build an empire, but if you still feel like an outsider when you come home, it's not truly complete. I began to see that what I craved wasn't money. It was recognition. Not from the world out there, but from the place I still called home. 3 weeks later was Daniel's wedding. I thought about it a lot. Should I go? Should I keep hoping? Then I decided I would go. Not to seek praise, but to confirm whether I was truly on the sidelines. And as you know, I got my answer in the kitchen. There are phone calls that last less than 3 minutes, but linger in your memory like a premonition of rejection. If you've ever had a gut feeling you were about to be sidelined but clung to the faint hope that maybe I'm overthinking it, this chapter is for you. Before I tell you exactly what happened at my brother's wedding, let me ask, have you ever realized you were excluded from something you clearly deserved to be part of? Please comment below, not just so I know you're listening, but so you know you're not alone. And if you're new to this channel, don't forget to follow. Stories like these may not change the past, but they can help you rewrite your future. 3 days before the wedding, Daniel called me. That was unusual. Our conversations in recent years had been limited to group texts, family chats, or through Mom. "Hey, I'm listening," I said, thinking maybe he wanted to discuss the wedding gift I was planning to give them, a honeymoon in Kyoto, a sincere effort to bridge the gap. "Hey," his voice sounded rushed. "I know you're busy. Just wanted to say, thanks for agreeing to come." I was slightly surprised. "Of course I'm coming. I'm your sister." "Yeah, right. The wedding might be a bit bigger than you expect." He gave a dry laugh. "Tiffany went all out. My father-in-law invited a ton of people I've never even met." I smiled lightly. "Sounds fancy." Then there was a clear pause. "So I wanted to mention," Daniel hesitated, "about the seating. There might be a slight change. The Bradfords added some last-minute guests, but it's all sorted." I didn't ask further. A thought flickered. Seating why call, just to mention that. But I brushed it off. This was my brother's wedding. I trusted him. I trusted the version of Daniel who taught me to ride a bike, who hid my bad test scores so our parents wouldn't scold me. I believed in an old version of Daniel, and sometimes that belief leads to the deepest disappointments. The wedding day arrived. Marcus and I left the hotel at 3 p.m., the sky still glowing with golden sunlight. The Bradford mansion was like a painting. White walls, gray-tiled roof, sprawling gardens with white flowers lining the paths. A string quartet played soothing melodies by a fountain. I wore a deep navy dress, elegant and appropriate, not too flashy, not too plain. Marcus, as always, looked sharp in a black suit, his observant eyes taking in everything. He gave my hand a gentle squeeze as we approached the reception table. The coordinator checked her iPad, asked for my name, and frowned. "Carter? Carter?" "Yes, Miss Emily Carter, and Marcus correct." "That's right," I replied, feeling a slight unease. "Table O," she said then, as if realizing something lowered her voice. "I'm sorry, there's been a last-minute change. I hope you'll understand. We've arranged a more convenient seat." Where Marcus asked, his tone gentle but firm. She didn't answer right away. She signaled a young server, whispered a few words, and told us to follow. We passed through rows of lavish banquet tables past the drink station and into a small, less-traveled hallway. When the door opened, I heard the whir of a mixer, the clatter of pots, and the sharp smell of sautéed garlic. Before me was the kitchen. "Your table, ma'am," the server said with a professional smile, pointing to a small 2-person table in the corner, near where chefs were plating dishes. I didn't react immediately. My body froze for a few seconds. Marcus stood beside me, equally stunned. "There must be a mistake," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I'm the groom's sister, and my company, Link Solutions, just signed a contract with Bradford Development." The coordinator hesitated. "I was only informed by the bride's side. They wanted the main tables reserved for priority partners." I nodded. I understood. Very clearly. It wasn't about space. It wasn't a mistake. It was because they didn't see me as a priority. Not as a sister. Not as a partner. Not in any capacity. I stood there silent. The sizzle of pans behind me. The smell of grilled meat mingling with the faint scent of orchids in my hair. And somewhere beyond the door, The soft music played on. Just 10 steps away was a dazzling, radiant space where people raised glasses, cameras flashed, and smiles shone. And I stood in the kitchen. Me, the one who delivered the software that optimized their entire supply chain, saving millions in operational costs. Me, the one who hoped that proving my worth would erase their biases. Marcus placed a hand on my shoulder. "We don't need to stay here." I looked at him. There was no anger in his eyes, just a quiet sadness I'd never seen before. And respect. He didn't say, "I'm sorry for you." He let me decide what came next. I took a deep breath. And I knew this wasn't the moment to cry. It was the moment to choose. I didn't make a scene. I didn't call anyone out. I just told Marcus wait for me a moment. I needed to be alone. Not to retreat, but to move forward in the truest way possible. Some decisions aren't about proving you're strong. They're about holding on to the parts of you that remain whole. When I walked out of that bustling kitchen where I was never meant to belong, I didn't leave with anger. I left with a clear realization it was time to redefine my worth and make others see it too. Before I tell you what I said, what I did, and how it nearly froze the entire wedding, let me ask you, would you dare stand up in the middle of a crowded event to defend your dignity, even if it meant losing something important? Share your thoughts in the comments. Maybe as you write, you'll discover the strength you already carry, and if you haven't followed the channel, hit follow. One day, a story you hear here might be the push you need to stand firm when it matters most. I walked out of that cold kitchen in silence. Marcus waited in the hallway, his eyes asking if I was sure about what I was about to do. I just nodded. No explanations, no extra words. He understood. In true relationships, some things don't need words. A glance is enough. We returned to the reception hall. I remember the scene vividly. Soft music playing crystal chandeliers, casting a warm glow over elegant tables, guests laughing, clinking glasses, exchanging toasts. No one noticed my return. Understandable, I wasn't the bride. I wasn't a key figure they needed to watch, except I was the one who wrote the software that saved the bride's family millions. I walked toward the VIP table where Daniel, Tiffany, my parents, and Richard Bradford sat with their partners. I walked slowly, steadily, head held high. Richard saw me first. He raised an eyebrow, slightly surprised. "Emily?" he smiled. "We were just talking about you. Bradford Enterprises is already seeing results from your software. Truly impressive." I nodded. "I know. My team reported this morning 12% faster order processing in just the first month. Everything was still normal. I kept my tone professional, steady. But the air began to shift like a cold breeze slipping into the warm party. Daniel looked at me, his eyes uneasy. Tiffany's discomfort was barely masked as she flicked her hair and turned to someone beside her, pretending to chat. I looked directly at Richard. "Mr. Bradford, may I ask a simple question?" I said. "If I weren't Daniel's sister, would you have invited me to sit in the kitchen?" He froze slightly. The air around us grew heavy. A few people nearby leaned in, straining to hear. "I'm not sure what you mean," Richard said slowly. "I think you understand perfectly," I replied, still calm. "My company, Link Solutions, is currently the primary provider of the software system your corporation relies on. We just deployed the entire system, and you made the first payment on time. Professionally, I'm not someone who belongs on the sidelines of this event." My dad cleared his throat. Tiffany's cousin sat at a side table too. "Emily," he interjected. "It's probably just a mix-up. Not a big deal." I turned to him, my voice still steady. Then why wasn't Tiffany's cousin or anyone else the one who helped her family's company save millions per quarter? No one answered. Tiffany stood up. "Emily, this is a wedding. You're making a scene." "You're right," I turned to her. "This is a wedding. A place where people show respect for one another, especially family and partners. But if my presence isn't necessary to you, I'll make things simpler for you." I pulled out my phone. The room went nearly silent. I called Gregory Lynx's COO on speaker. "Hello," his voice came through. I deliberately didn't use earphones. "Gregory, it's Emily. I need you to terminate the contract with Bradford Enterprises. Effective immediately. Please start the legal process tomorrow morning." Silence. The entire VIP table froze. Daniel's jaw dropped. Richard stood, his face paling. "Miss Carter, hold on. This is a major business decision." Maybe it's just a small misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding here, sir. I cut him off, still calm. If a CEO like me isn't valued enough for a proper seat at your event, Lynx doesn't need to work with your organization. I hung up. Every eye was on me. Some thought I was crazy. Some thought I was weak, emotional. But in others' eyes, I saw something new, respect beginning to spark. I didn't stay. Marcus and I walked away from the table through the whispering crowd and straight out the door. I didn't say another word. But I knew what needed to be said had been said. That night my phone buzzed non-stop. Richard, Daniel, even my mom called. I didn't answer. Not because I was avoiding them, but because I wanted them to have time to understand this wasn't just about a seat. It was about respect. Some apologies can't undo the past, but they can open a future where the heart no longer carries doubt. If you've ever wished a loved one would admit their mistake just once so you know your pain wasn't imagined, this chapter is for you. Before I continue, let me ask. If your mom or dad unintentionally hurt you deeply, would you be ready to forgive if they came back and said I was wrong? Share your thoughts in the comments. There's no right or wrong answer, just honest experiences worth sharing. And if you haven't followed the channel, hit follow, because healing is never a solo journey. 3 days after Daniel's wedding, I received a short text from my mom. If you have time, I'd like to see you, just us. Edgewood Park, 4 p.m. today. No emojis, no explanations, but for me that was enough. My mom, Susan Carter, wasn't one for words. Throughout my childhood, she was the kind of woman who kept things neat, clean, and on time. No raised voices, no hugs. She believed love was shown through balanced meals and ironed clothes. I'd never heard her say I'm proud of you, but I'd also never seen her cry. I arrived at the park on time. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through old oak trees, casting golden hues on the grass. Mom was already there, sitting on a bench by the small lake, hands folded in her lap like a resting bird. I approached. She looked up. A faint smile appeared at the corner of her lips, unfamiliar, almost foreign. I sat beside her, saying nothing at first. I wanted her to speak. She took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the lake. When I was young, I was seated at a side table at my sister's wedding. I was surprised. This story had never been mentioned at home. I'd just come back from teaching school, she continued. Short hair, wearing a dress I sewed myself because I couldn't afford a new one. They said I was provincial. I sat behind the kitchen next to a crackling speaker. Back then I thought, when I grow up, if I have a daughter, I won't let her be treated like that. She paused. A breeze carried the scent of magnolias and distant children's laughter. But I did the opposite. I let you sit in the kitchen. Literally and figuratively. My throat tightened. I didn't look at her. I just nodded faintly. I didn't do it because I hated you, she went on. I did it because I was scared. Scared of what I asked, my voice barely audible. Scared you'd outshine Daniel. She turned to me. For the first time I saw unhidden shame in her eyes. Daniel was the one I pinned my hopes on. The heir. I was afraid if you succeeded more, he'd feel like a failure. I thought I was protecting him. But I was hurting both of you. I didn't cry, but my hands clenched tightly. How many times had I wondered, am I not good enough? Now I understood I was too good, so much so that it scared her in ways she couldn't control. You have every right to be angry, she said. I wouldn't blame you if you never forgave me. I took a deep breath, feeling my chest tighten. Then she pulled a small velvet box from her purse and placed it in my hand. Open it. I did. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a poppy-shaped pendant intricately crafted. It was your grandmother's, she said. She wore it when she taught. She said, women have their own worth. Keep your head high, even if no one sees you. I hid it for years, thinking I'd give it to Daniel's wife. I looked at her. She smiled, sad and gentle. Now I know I was wrong. You're the one who deserves it. Not because you succeeded, but because you went through everything and still held on to yourself. I held the necklace, my hands trembling slightly. You don't have to forgive me now, she added. I just want to start again if you'll let me. I looked at the necklace, its silver glinting in the sunset. I thought of the child hunched over a computer, hoping for her parents' praise. I thought of the teenager who won a tech scholarship but never heard. Are you excited about this field? I thought of the woman who stood silently in a kitchen at a wedding. And then I thought of the mother sitting beside me, daring to shed the perfect mother role she'd worn her whole life. I put the necklace on. I don't know if I can fully forgive yet, I said. But I'm willing to take a step if you're willing to walk with me. She nodded, her eyes glistening. We sat a while longer, saying nothing, just watching the lake turn golden. As we stood to leave, she said, "If you have time, come home for dinner, not a party. Just a regular meal. I'll cook." I smiled. "Will you make my beet salad? No one else in the house can stomach it," she replied. "But this time I'll try." That night I returned to my apartment, took off my dress, and hung the necklace on a wooden hook by the mirror. I looked at it like a cherished memory, no longer heavy with pain. Not all wounds need to be erased. Some should be kept as reminders that you lived truly hurt, truly, and healed truly. Forgiveness doesn't start with words. It starts with actions, especially the ones no one sees, no one acknowledges, and you don't expect anyone to know about. If you've ever let go of your ego to do what's right, even when the person you helped didn't know this chapter is for you, before I tell you about the boldest, quietest decision of my life, let me ask, are you willing to help someone who hurt you simply because it's the right thing to do? Share in the comments below. Your story might be a light for someone still navigating the darkness of hurt. And if you haven't followed the channel, hit follow, because what I'm about to share might make you rethink the word forgiveness. A week after canceling the Bradford contract, I got an email from Gregory Lynx's COO with the subject line, "Carter Construction is in trouble." Serious trouble. I opened it. Attached was a report from an investment source. Richard Bradford Daniels' father-in-law had pulled all his capital from Carter Construction 3 days after the wedding. The move not only slashed the company's value by 40% in a week, but also caused several construction partners to pause contracts awaiting clarity on internal matters. In other words, Carter Construction was in free fall. I sat quietly in my office. The yellow lamp cast a dim glow over the analytical documents, creating an unshakable sense of gloom. Part of me felt this was deserved. A natural consequence of years of undervaluing family. A logical outcome of a party where the one who could have saved them was pushed to the kitchen. But another part, the one that didn't scream or rebel, whispered softly, "Your family is sinking. You can save them. Not because they deserve it, but because you're capable of doing what's right." I closed my eyes. The image of my mom on the park bench holding the silver necklace flashed in my mind. Her words, "I just want to start again if you'll let me." If I truly wanted to start again, this was the moment to choose. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't email my dad. I didn't tell my mom. Instead, I called someone else, Maya Inoue, my college friend, now an investment director at a VC fund in San Francisco. "Emily, it's been a while," she said, her voice cheerful. "I heard you kicked Bradford to the curb. I nearly clapped in a meeting." I laughed, then got to the point. "I've got a construction company that needs investment. Problem is, they don't know they need it." Maya paused for a few seconds, then said, "Send me the files. I don't need to know why you're doing this. If the numbers make sense, my fund is in." I sent all the documents on Carter Construction, anonymously listing only a trusted intermediary. 3 weeks later, I got word Maya's fund agreed to invest, but required Carter Construction to overhaul its governance and cede partial control to an independent financial advisory team for 18 months. I nodded. They needed that. Not just money, but a shock to rebuild. I asked Maya to keep my role secret, no mention of my name in any reports, meetings, or news. "You're crazy," she laughed. "This is your chance for a sweet revenge." Why hide? I looked out my window where birds glided across Boston's gray sky. Because I don't need them to know I said. I just need to know I did the right thing. 3 months passed. I heard nothing from my family. I kept working, leading Lynx through another major project in Houston. Days were busy, but at night I sometimes wondered, do they know? Then, one September morning, I received a small package with no sender's name. Inside was a handwritten letter in Daniel's familiar script. "Emily, today I learned about the investment that saved the company. A fund from San Francisco. The report said it was introduced by an anonymous partner. I'm guessing it's you. If I'm right, I don't know how to thank you, because I didn't deserve that help. I'm also sorry for that awful call before the wedding, and for the seating. I know you don't need apologies, but I need to give one because I need forgiveness. Thank you for not letting Dad's company collapse. Thank you for being kind when no one asked you to be." I set the letter down. My heart tightened, but in a way that felt lighter. I don't know if Daniel will change. I don't know if my parents ever mentioned my role in saving the company. But I know one thing: I didn't let anger define me. And for me, that's enough. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering clearly but choosing to act with clarity, not pain. You don't need their thanks. You just need to know you didn't lose yourself to punish someone else. Have you ever helped someone who hurt you without needing them to know or thank you, just because it was right? If so, share below. I believe the quietest actions are often the loudest proof of forgiveness. A message from Gregory arrived on a Tuesday morning. Bradford officially pulled their capital from Carter & Sons. They're freezing all remaining disbursements from last quarter. Thought you should know. I read the message 3 times. A chill ran down my spine. Carter & Sons was my dad's construction company, but since Daniel took over as lead, it had become Daniel's business. Their relationship with the Bradford Group wasn't just commercial. It was symbiotic in laws, partners, a new power alliance cemented at that wedding. And now, because of one sentence I spoke at that event, everything was unraveling. I could imagine Daniel's face when he heard the news. Shock. The call he might make likely filled with anger and disappointment. But no, Daniel didn't call. Maybe pride. Maybe he was too busy handling the fallout. I closed my phone and sat motionless in my office for 10 minutes. I didn't regret standing up at the wedding, but I also didn't want my family or the workers at Carter & Sons to bear the lasting consequences of one person's pride, and that was the moment I decided I'd do what was right, even if no one else saw it. I called Alyssa, an old friend now, working as an investment advisor at a prominent private equity fund in New York. She'd expressed interest in expanding into sustainable infrastructure, but hadn't found the right partner. I pitched Carter & Sons, briefly outlining their current situation with one condition: don't let my name show up. Make it go through an intermediary. If they invest, let them think they discovered the opportunity themselves. Alyssa chuckled on the other end. Emily, you always make things valuable, even kindness. All right, I'll look into it. 3 weeks later, I got an internal links report from Gregory. Rumor has it, Emerson Fund is negotiating to buy a minority stake in Carter & Sons. If true, it's a lifeline. I didn't respond. I just texted Alyssa, thanks. You don't know how much this means. Daniel still didn't know. I avoided family gatherings through the holidays, not out of anger, but because I wasn't ready to face questioning looks, or worse, oblivious ones. Then in March, nearly 4 months after the wedding, I got an unexpected email from Emerson Fund's legal team CC'd to Gregory, starting with, "We'd like to thank a member of the business community for introducing Carter & Sons, a promising family company we hadn't noticed before." The email was sent by mistake. It was meant to be internal, but accidentally CC'd me. And Daniel was on the list too. 3 hours later, Daniel called. "It was you, wasn't it?" His voice wasn't angry, just quiet. I didn't deny it. "Yes." A silence stretched for nearly 10 seconds. Why, he asked. "After everything, you still—" I exhaled, because I didn't want Carter & Sons to collapse. Not for you, for Dad, for the people working there. And because I don't want to hold on to hate. I just need boundaries, not war. Another silence. Then he said simply, "Thank you." For the first time in years, I believed that thank you came from his heart, not obligation. That night, I looked back on everything since that wedding. From the moment I walked out of the kitchen, to my mom placing her grandmother's necklace in my hand, to now helping someone who hurt me without seeking praise. There's a kind of forgiveness that doesn't need declarations or proof. It just needs you to know you're not controlled by old wounds. I put on the necklace. The agate stone touched my skin, a reminder. Strength isn't about winning, it's about staying kind even when you have every reason not to. If you've ever chosen to let go of your ego to do what's right, even when the person you helped didn't know, this chapter is for you. Before I share the boldest, quietest decision of my life, let me ask, are you willing to help someone who hurt you just because it's the right thing to do? Share in the comments below. Your story might be a light for someone still lost in the shadows of pain. And if you haven't followed, hit follow, because what I'm about to tell might make you rethink forgiveness. Have you ever stood on a stage sharing your journey, your success, and among hundreds of strangers' eyes, you suddenly see a face you've longed to see in that moment your whole life? Not because they never saw you, but because they never truly saw you. If you've ever waited for your dad to be proud of you, not for high grades, but for living true to your passion, this chapter is for you. Before I continue, let me ask, Is there a loved one whose single acknowledgement would make all your years of effort feel soothed? If so, share their name in the comments, or just write one word, waiting. Maybe one day they'll read it, and if you haven't followed, hit follow. Stories like these might be the whisper you need on an ordinary day. That conference was a new milestone for Lynx. I was invited as the keynote speaker, something that 3 years ago was an unreachable dream. The auditorium was large, lights soft. The LED screen displaying my name in minimalist white font, Emily Carter, founder and CEO Lynx Solutions. Backstage, I reviewed my speech one last time. Marcus texted shine bright with a star emoji. I smiled. When my introduction echoed, I stepped onto the stage with a calm I'd never felt before. No more fear from presenting in a room full of male tech students. No need to prove anything. Today I wasn't representing anger or pain. I was just me. I spoke about Lynx's journey from an old laptop in a tiny apartment, sleepless nights debugging code, to the first contract, and painful rejections. The room was silent. I saw empathy in the audience's eyes. Then I spoke about intrinsic value, how in tech or any field you can't expect others to see your worth if you don't define it first. As I spoke, my eyes drifted to the back row, and I stopped. There quietly had slightly bowed as if trying to blend into the crowd was my dad. Robert Carter. I don't remember how I continued the next few minutes. Probably some autopilot from years of public speaking, but in my mind old images flooded back, Dad brushing me off to talk business with Daniel. Dad praising Daniel's football, telling me to spend less time on computers. Dad saying, "You're smart, but tech isn't stable, honey." And now he was here. Not in the front row of honor, but in the back. The speech ended with prolonged applause. People came to shake hands, take photos, ask about Lynx's tech solutions. I smiled, answered fully, but my eyes kept tracking the gray-haired man lingering by the aisle, waiting for me to be free. Finally, he approached. No longer stern, no longer awkward. He held a small envelope. "I didn't want to bother you," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "But I wanted to give you this." I took it, opened it. Inside was an old photo edges yellowed me 8 years old, sitting at my first desktop computer, eyes alight, small hands tapping a keyboard almost bigger than me. "I found it in an old box," he said. "Back then I didn't understand what you were doing. I thought it was a game." I looked up. He didn't look away. "Now I understand. You weren't playing. You were building a world." I wanted to say something, but my throat tightened. "I'm sorry for being late," he said. "But I want you to know today, I saw you. Truly saw you." And then, as if afraid he'd said too much, he turned to leave. I stood there holding the photo, tears falling without me noticing. Not because I was weak, but because waiting to be seen isn't weakness, it's deeply human. That evening I returned to my apartment and placed the photo next to my grandmother's silver necklace. Seeing them side by side, I felt a timeline reconnect through imperfect people who chose courage. No one teaches fathers how to say sorry to their daughters. But if they're brave enough to learn, an entire relationship can be salvaged. Some doors don't need knocking. They open because you stood tall before the ones that slammed shut in your face. If you've ever said no to something wrong, even if it cost you, and then realized the world still turns maybe even better, this chapter is for you. Before I continue, leave a line in the comments. I choose value over compromise. Not because the words are magic, but because writing them ties you to something bigger than temporary peace. And if you haven't followed, hit follow. The most beautiful parts of a journey often start after the cracks. 2 weeks after the Boston speech, I returned to Lynx's office with a strange lightness. Not because everything was resolved, but because I'd weathered a storm without losing myself. That Monday morning, as I set my coffee on my desk, Lana, my assistant, walked in, looking both confused and excited. "I filtered your emails this morning," she said. "Over 30 messages from companies wanting to collaborate or meet you. Most mention we admire how Ms. Carter handled the Bradford situation." I looked up. "They know there's an analysis post on a major tech blog. They're calling you the CEO who knows when to say no." I gave a small laugh. Not of victory, but of realization. Truth doesn't need to shout, it has its own voice. Over the next week, I met representatives from 7 companies, from East Coast real estate giants to a Texas infrastructure startup. Some didn't ask about our product, they just wanted to meet me. A CEO from Apex Capital said, "We invest in people. And you, Ms. Carter, are a rare example, a leader who'd sacrifice a multi-million-dollar deal for principle. The world needs more CEOs like you." I wasn't sure I deserved that. I didn't stand up to be a role model. I did what I had to, so I could look in the mirror each morning without bowing my head. On Friday evening, as I was tidying my desk to leave early, Lana knocked, holding a white envelope. "A personal delivery for you," she said. No sender address, just handwritten on the outside, "From the kitchen." I took the envelope, my heart skipping half a beat. Inside was a handwritten letter. Simple paper, simple ink. But each line carried a sincerity hard to name. "Dear Ms. Emily, I was a server at Daniel and Tiffany's wedding, working in the kitchen where you were seated. At first, I didn't know who was who, but after hearing what you said to the organizers, I realized you were the only one who didn't raise your voice, but had a presence that commanded the room. That night, when you stood up and left, I didn't just see a guest protesting. I saw a woman who knew her worth and wouldn't let anyone diminish it. A few days later, I quit that job. I couldn't stay in an environment that lacked respect, but because of you, I found the courage to do it. Now I'm studying hospitality management. My goal is to create a space where every employee is called by their proper name and serves with dignity. Thank you for not staying silent. Because of you, I learned to stand up even in a kitchen. HG." I folded the letter and set it on my desk. I sat in silence for a long time. Not because I was moved, but because I realized every time you choose what's right, you're not just choosing for yourself. You're choosing for someone who hasn't yet found their voice. That evening I walked home instead of taking a cab. Boston was turning to autumn leaves, golden, the breeze crisp. I passed a small diner with warm yellow lights where a young woman was guiding a new employee on table settings. She didn't know anyone was watching, but I saw something in her posture, upright, gentle, certain. I don't know if she was HG, but I know this kindness spreads. So does strength. You can choose silence for peace, or you can choose to speak so you and others grow stronger. Every time you choose value over compromise, the world adjusts to you a little every day. If you've ever walked into a meeting with caution, but left with a piece of peace, not because everything was resolved, but because someone chose truth over silence, this chapter is for you. Before I continue, leave a comment. I've been waiting for those words for a long time. Whether you've never heard them or just did recently, recognizing you've been waiting is a vital step in healing. And if you haven't followed, hit follow. Sometimes a sincere word starts from the pages of a stranger. Daniel's text came on a Wednesday afternoon. "Free tonight, want to grab dinner? Old Place Frank's Deli, 7 p.m., if you can make it." I stared at the message for nearly a minute. No emojis, no excuses, no hint of "it's urgent" or "something important." But I understood. He was trying. Frank's Deli was the little corner spot where our parents took us for birthdays or rare peaceful weekends. Where I learned I liked grilled chicken sandwiches over cold cuts, and where Daniel once snuck extra salt into my orange juice just to see me grimace. I arrived on time. Daniel was already there, fiddling with his fork, looking more like a nervous student awaiting exam results than a 35-year-old newlywed. "You're here." He looked up, giving a sheepish smile. "I ordered your old favorite. Hope it still suits your taste." I sat nodding. The air was quiet at first. I gave him space to speak. After all, he was the one who asked to meet. After a moment, he looked up, holding my gaze longer than usual. "I still remember the night you coded until dawn, right before your SATs. I nodded. "Yeah, you said I was friendless and obsessed with computers like a lunatic." He gave a small laugh. "I did, but I didn't say it because I thought you were weird. I said it because I was jealous." I froze. Not because I hadn't considered it, but because he admitted it. Daniel looked at his hands. Growing up, I was always the one Mom and Dad hyped up. Basketball construction, bold personality. It all fit their mold. But watching you quiet, diligent, smarter than your teachers, I was scared. You didn't need applause to move forward. If no one cheered for me, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt pity, part of me anger, because if he understood that, why had he kept hurting me all those years? As if reading my thoughts, he continued, "I'm not here to beg forgiveness or blame Mom and Dad. I just need to be honest. I saw you were better than me. And that's something I couldn't face." I looked into his eyes. No trace of arrogance. Just a brother, confused, tired, from running from a truth he was now ready to accept. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice soft as a spoon clinking on a plate. "Not just for the wedding. For every time I made you feel small." You were never small. I was the one shrinking myself every time you took a step forward. I let out a long breath, not because the wound was erased, but because I no longer had to hold on to the knot in my chest. I don't need you to apologize for who I am, I said, but I appreciate you being honest. We sat quietly for a moment. The grilled chicken sandwich grew cold, but neither of us cared. The air between us wasn't tense anymore, just still. As we parted in the parking lot, Daniel lightly grasped my shoulder. I didn't want you to outshine me, Emily, but now I see you deserve to. And if you'll let me, I want to learn how to be your brother again. I looked at him. For the first time, I didn't see envy in his eyes. Just release. Can we start with dinners where we don't talk business? I asked. He smiled. I'll try, as long as you don't order a cold-cut sandwich. I laughed, and for the first time in years, I felt I was standing next to my brother, not as a rival, but as two grown kids learning to start over. We don't need everyone we love to understand us. But if just one of them is brave enough to look back and speak the truth, everything can change. Not every door you close stays shut forever. Sometimes it's knocked on again, this time by someone who didn't think you'd dare close it. If you've ever faced the chance to revisit something you bravely refused, only to find reasons stronger than emotion, this chapter is for you. Before I share that day's story, leave a comment. I choose respect, not compensation. A reminder not just for others, but for yourself that some values, when held, stay with you for life. And if you haven't followed, hit follow. We've got one final chapter. One, I believe, you'll need. That morning started like any other black coffee. 2 meetings, a product review. Until Lana walked in with a sleek, silver-gray invitation. From Bradford's office, she said, placing it on my desk. Not an event. A direct meeting. Richard wants to see you. Mentions possibly resuming the contract. I looked at the card. One side embossed Richard Bradford, Chairman, Bradford Development. The other location, 34th floor. The Armitage, 3 p.m. today. Purpose discuss, renewed partnership. I didn't respond immediately. Not out of hesitation, but because I needed to be clear who was I walking into that room as... At exactly 3 p.m., I stepped into the 34th floor meeting room, where months ago I was both courted and cast aside because of a seating chart. Richard stood to shake my hand, his eyes guarded but no longer arrogant. Ms. Carter, he said, thank you for coming. I sat down. No need for fake pleasantries. I wasn't here for apologies, I was here to hear what he had to say. He began with a tone I wasn't used to from him, soft or cautious. We made a mistake, he said, personally and strategically. I won't deny that. And I'd like to be direct. We're ready to reinstate the contract with Lynx with better terms than before. I looked him in the eye. Better terms. For what reason? Because you've proven Lynx isn't just a tech provider, he replied. It's a brand with principles. And that conviction is what we need in our new strategy. I stayed silent for a few seconds. Everything he said made sense. Years ago, I'd have seen this as a golden opportunity, but I wasn't in that place in my heart anymore. I appreciate your goodwill, I said slowly, but I didn't come here to reclaim a contract. I came to confirm I'm still the person I chose to be. He looked up, slightly surprised. Bradford is a big name, I continued, but Lynx doesn't exist to be an extension of someone else's empire. We create our own value, and what I seek isn't compensation. It's respect. In that moment, I saw clearer than ever saying no isn't defiance. It's a declaration of boundaries and self-respect. Richard didn't argue. He nodded slowly. You don't need to explain further. I understand. We ended the meeting with a handshake, this time as true equals. No contract was signed, but one thing was clear. I no longer needed anyone's approval to define my worth. That evening, I returned to the office. Marcus was waiting with 2 teas and a small smile. Victory, he asked. Better than victory, I replied. A win without stepping onto a battlefield. You can achieve everything, but if you trade yourself to get it, what you gain is just a shell. True strength isn't in signing more contracts. It's in saying no, even to what was once a dream. Some invitations from the first line tell you you're about to enter a moment you can't return from. Dad wants to host a family dinner. No formalities, no comparisons, just an honest meal. Bring Marcus. My mom texted at 9:32 p.m. If you've ever received an invitation like that from someone who once made you feel like a stranger in your own home, leave a short comment. I've waited for a meal like that. So we can remember not every table is for eating, Some are for learning to sit together again. We arrived as dusk settled. My parents' house was the same red-tiled roof-white fence, the faint smell of freshly cut grass. But what was different was that I didn't walk in feeling judged. Marcus squeezed my hand as I rang the bell. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. For the first time, I don't feel like I need answers ready for every question. Mom opened the door, her face slightly flustered, maybe because she didn't expect me to actually show up and on time. "Emily. Marcus. Come in." Dad was setting the last plates on the table, the first time I'd seen him in a wrinkled but clean shirt, not the polished formality of dinners for the sake of having the daughter there. Daniel was pouring orange juice, and for once he wasn't glancing at his phone. Tiffany wasn't there. I guessed she wasn't ready, and that was okay. We sat at the table midway, not at the edge, or near the kitchen, like at the wedding. On the table were grilled meat, cornbread, tomato salad, all foods I loved, but no one had remembered in years. "Still like these?" Mom asked. I looked at her smiling. Maybe. I never stopped. The meal passed quietly but without tension. No one mentioned work or Lynx's revenue. Daniel shared a story about misusing a new drill and nearly breaking a client's window. Everyone laughed. Even me. Marcus was the perfect storyteller and subtle enough to say little, only occasionally resting his hand on my knee, a quiet reminder. You belong here. No need to prove it. After dessert, Dad stood, poured more wine, and looked at me for a long time. Someone asked me what Emily's been up to. I told them she's teaching our family how to grow up again. They didn't understand. But I think now we do. My throat tightened. Not because Dad acknowledged me, but because he acknowledged himself and the journey we'd all taken, however late. As we prepared to leave, Mom handed me a small wooden box. "The pin Tiffany gave you, I thought it was beautiful. If you want, I can keep it in this family heirloom box. Your grandmother used it for buttons. Now it's time it held something more valuable." I placed the pin inside. The engraved steel still read, "Respect earned." On the way to the car, Marcus paused and turned to me. "You didn't need their recognition," he said. "But you just taught them how to recognize you." I glanced back at the old house. In the golden light spilling through the window, I saw the shadow of my younger self, the dreamy girl clutching a computer once seen as an outsider. Now a woman who knew exactly where her seat was, not at the table's edge, not in the kitchen, but at the center of the story she'd written herself. The end isn't the end. Because you don't need to be given a rightful seat. You can build the entire table and invite yourself and those wise enough to sit with you. If you've ever walked the path to find recognition from family, from yourself, share your feelings in the comments. And if you know someone who needs this story, don't hesitate to share. Thank you for joining me and Emily to the end of this story. If you want me to write more about Marcus Tiffany, or another family learning to heal, just say so. The end is where another story begins. Are you ready?